Welcome to INKOnversation, the podcast that fuels your entrepreneurial spirit, brought to you by INKOMOCO. We deliver thought-provoking conversations with industry leaders, game changers, and unsung heroes, all making an impact in their communities and shaping the future of business. Let's grow together and transform the world, one business at a time.
Good afternoon. My name is David Indekwe, and I'm currently the investment manager at INKOMOCO. And thank you very much for allowing us to have this conversation with you today. Can you share a bit about your journey and an overview of Green Fund to date?
My name is Ms.Teddy Mugabo, and I'm the CEO of the Rwanda Green Fund. So a little bit about myself. I've been working in the sector of environment and climate change for about 12 years now. And this journey began in 2012 when I joined the Ministry of Environment. At the time, it was called the Ministry of Natural Resources in the planning department. And it was such an amazing experience because that's when the EDPRS, which is the Economic Development Plan, was being developed. And at the time, environment and climate change had been identified as a cross-cutting issue, which had to be mainstreamed across different sector priorities. So that's really when I picked up my interest, and the Rwanda Green Fund was actually being designed. So a year later, the fund was fully established. So I moved from the ministry to the Rwanda Green Fund, which was also known as FONERA. To give some context on who we are as the Rwanda Green Fund, we're a government fund which has been established to act as a financing vehicle that can attract the climate financing needed to support our country's climate agenda. The government of Rwanda has really placed a huge importance on addressing environmental challenges and combating climate change and placing it at the core of our development. And furthermore, it was basically seen pertinent to establish a fund which would attract the financial resources needed to translate all these policies into action. So we've recently celebrated our 10th year anniversary, and we've been mainly working with development partners. So both bilateral as well as multilateral, we've been attracting funding from those sources. And we're able to then deploy funding to both the public and the private sector through various financial instruments. I started working for a capacity building project, which was mainly supporting districts and NGOs at the local level to be able to basically equip them with the tools and skills and to be able to tap into the financing that we had mobilized at the fund. So I did that for 2 years, and then I took a break in 2015 and went to the UK, where I did a master's in climate change and development at the University of Sussex. And then I came back to the fund. I worked on resource mobilization, and later on was appointed as the head of business development. And in 2020, I was appointed as the CEO of the Rwanda Green Fund. I've been in the fund for 10 years, and it's honestly been an amazing journey to see the fund grow, but also to witness some of the amazing projects that we've been able to finance and really looking at the impact that they're having on the ground.
Thank you, Teddy, for that brief introduction. What are some of the key environmental challenges the fund is working to address, and how?
I think this really goes back to when you see what's happening currently in the world. Climate change is real and it's happening, and it's also affecting key economic sectors such as agriculture, such as infrastructure. And therefore, it's really important that we address the issue of climate change, because if we don't, it will have significant impacts on livelihoods, on GDP. For example, when you look at the majority of the population of Rwanda depends on agriculture. So over 80% relies on subsistence farming, which is mainly rain-fed agriculture. So what this means is that when we experience rainfall variability, or when a farmer was expecting to harvest in a certain season and this changes, then this has a significant impact on the farmer's harvest, but also which will significantly impact also the livelihood. So that's just one example. So we look at projects that can incorporate irrigation. When we're experiencing drought, for example, we could focus on adopting various technologies such as irrigation that farmers can use to irrigate their crops when there isn't sufficient rainfall. There's also other techniques such as rainwater harvesting or water storage, which are techniques that can be used to store water when it's in excess. Another sector that we are intervening in is electric mobility. So electric mobility is a new sector, I would say, that has great potential to also keep growing in Rwanda. And here, an example I can give is we provided funding to a startup in 2018 by the name of Ampersand. I'm sure most of you have heard, which is basically a company that was the first to deploy electric motorcycles in Rwanda. And at the time, this was the first time we had heard of electric motorcycle in the city of Kigali, and therefore they needed to test the technology and the innovation that they were bringing about, but also engage the motorcyclists. We were able to provide funding or de-risk projects for startups that maybe need to engage the market to really get a sense of whether this would work. This is one of our projects that has been very successful, because when you look at Ampersand right now, they've been able to grow, they've attracted venture capital, and now are expanding to Nairobi. So these are some of the projects, but we've also invested in biodiversity and conservation projects. So the Nyandugo Eco Park being one of, I believe it's the first ecotourism park in the city of Kigali. So we also want to address the challenges, but also create new opportunities that can generate jobs, that can improve livelihoods. Those are the few examples that I would give.
Rwanda is gaining recognition globally for its effort in climate change resilience. What do you believe is the role of public-private partnership in advancing environmental sustainability, and how can the Green Fund facilitate such collaborations?
A very interesting question. I'll first tackle this from a resource mobilization point of view. So again, Rwanda has prioritized addressing environmental issues and as well as tackling climate change as part of our development. So we want to develop in a climate compatible way. We don't have to choose between one or the other. Now, for this to happen, we also have an ambitious climate action goal. It's referred to as the Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs. And this is basically whereby all the countries under the Paris Agreement have committed to reduce a certain percentage of carbon emissions. So as a government, we have committed to reduce carbon emissions by 38% by the year 2030. And this would require us to mobilize 11 billion by 2030. Looking at what has been mobilized so far, we do have a financing gap of about 6.5 billion. Now, the reason why I had to put this into context, when you look at how we've been mobilizing funding, we've mainly been working with traditional development partners, whereby we've been attracting mainly public funding. Now, when you look at the climate finance architecture around the world, but also when you look at the limitations and the different challenges that we're experiencing, whether it's COVID or very many different issues or geopolitical issues, it's important that we identify different sources of where this funding is actually going to come from. That's why we've actually now started looking at ways in which we can use the limited public finance that is available to unlock private sector finance. And that's why at the fund, we're actually now looking at different financial instruments that can actually also look at ways in which we can unlock private capital. In last year at COP27, the Rwanda Green Fund, in partnership with the Development Bank of Rwanda, we launched what we call the Invest. And this is a private sector facility that's looking to blend using public finance to unlock private financing, but also use this opportunity because when you look at the green sector, we're going to require innovation and technology. And some of these are seen as risky, especially when you start talking to the financial sector or the banks. So we want to use a blended finance approach where we can basically use the public finance or any patient capital out there to de-risk, to test these technologies, to test business models so that we can then unlock the private sector finance. In a nutshell, that's why I believe that public-private partnerships are going to be extremely essential for us to be able to achieve our climate agenda, but also to be able to unlock the necessary resources really required to achieve this target. We are mobilizing the financing, but we also have a catalytic role that we are playing, and that's how we've partnered with the Development Bank of Rwanda. We're working closely with the Kigali International Financial Center, the Ministry of Finance. So we're really also playing the catalytic role that can unlock or bring on board more and more partners to be able to drive the green agenda.
The Green Fund has been a key player in Rwanda's environmental landscape for nearly a decade. As you approach the 10-year mark, a truly visible statement to the impact and importance of the fund. What are some of the specific milestones that best illustrate the intention and impact of your work?
The Rwanda Green Fund was established to really support the implementation of our green growth and climate resilience strategy as a nation. Since the establishment of the fund, we've been able to invest in 46 projects across different sectors. These really range from, ecotourism to waste and circular economy to mobility to afforestation. We've been able to do this with the support of our partners, the likes of the Green Climate Fund and Jeff, the Global Environmental Facility. Looking back, we've been able to attract close to $300 million US. That's what we've used to invest in the 46 projects. Maybe one really good sort of KPI that I can highlight is that with the projects that we've been able to implement, we've been able to create more than 176,000 jobs.
That's quite a very good achievement, I can say. At INKOmoko, we believe that all the problems in Africa have solutions within Africa. And it is to this end we learn and partner and recruit from the communities we serve. How does the organization engage with local communities to ensure the success of environmental projects?
Thank you, David. I do believe that we have a similar approach at the fund. As I highlighted, we do invest in projects that are addressing climate change, but we also really place people at the center. So we want to invest in projects that are going to bring about change in the local communities and build resilience so that they can also withstand the shocks of climate change. An example of one of our flagship projects, which is the Green Gicumbi, that is very much focused on community, looks at strengthening climate resilience of the communities, but also building adaptive capacity. And this is a project that is being implemented in 9 sectors across the district of Gicumbi. And one of the reasons why we selected Gicumbi was mainly because of the terrain. So when you go to Gicumbi, it has very hilly slopes. Therefore, a lot of the farmers are growing crops on steep slopes that are highly vulnerable to flooding, landslides. And so in cases where there's intense rainfall, they were losing a lot of the crops due to soil erosion. We basically selected this district because of all the topographical challenges that the local communities that live there were facing. And so with this project, we've been able to, one, support farmers that are in the tea plantation. There's a big tea plantation in Gicumbi, which is basically in a wetland. But this wetland is surrounded with hilly slopes. So therefore, when it rained, you had landslides that would go and dump in the tea plantation. But we also are supporting the farmers that have land on these slopes to basically be able to stabilize the slopes. So through terracing, but also teaching them to, or raising different awareness on the right crop varieties that can withstand shocks. But it's a really, it's a community approach whereby we listen to them. They know all the challenges, they know what the solutions are, but we can also bring in extra expertise or experts that can help them get to the next level.
Building climate resilience is an ongoing process that requires continuous adaptation to evolving climate conditions. How do you stay informed on the current regional or international trends and innovations?
We have several partners across the world because climate change is a global issue. We are part of different networks and task forces. So for example, right now, we are co-chairing with the United Kingdom a task force on access to climate finance, which is basically looking at the challenges that developing countries face when they're trying to access the financing needed to address the environmental issues. We also participate in international conferences such as COP. So COP is the Conference of Parties, and this is the biggest climate change conference, which happens on an annual basis. And this has been one of our greatest platforms. We have been going as part of Team Rwanda, whereby Rwanda has a pavilion, and with this pavilion, we're able to showcase, but also engage partners and have several events and sign deals. So we're very, very active in the international community, both with like-minded partners, with the climate financiers, DFIs. We have to make sure that we stay connected to also understand the different financial flows, because this is a topic that also keeps changing. We talk about environment, we talk about climate change. Now there's a big topic coming up on biodiversity. So we also want to make sure that we're staying on top of the game and understanding where the opportunities are so that we're able to tap into those to support the government's agenda.
On the same note, Teddy, why is it so important for us, Rwanda, to have an active seat at the table when discussing about a global issue like climate change?
It is very important because, again, when you look at Rwanda, I think the topography, for example, we are very and extremely vulnerable to climate change. One, we're densely populated, so we have limited land, but even that limited land that we have, some of it is also not arable. So we do have to really stay on top and understand, and also what different mechanisms or tools or technologies can we adopt to be able to withstand and be able to continue to develop. So like I just gave an example of Gicumbi, it's one district, but there's also several districts that are experiencing impacts of climate change. Just as you know, last year in May, we lost over 130 lives because of the nature of our landscapes and the nature of some of our local communities that are still living in high-risk zones. It's very important for a country like Rwanda to stay on top because, one, we are extremely vulnerable to climate change. This really cuts across sectors, key economic sectors such as agriculture, settlements, infrastructure. And two, we also do believe that there are opportunities out there. So again, we don't have to choose between environmental climate change and development. We actually want to use the opportunities that are out there for green financing to also address our development needs. It's really important that we stay at the seat, we stay on top of things, but also be aware of the opportunities that are out there that can help us not only achieve our environmental or our climate change goals, but also tap into the opportunities that can help us to develop in a climate compatible way.
You touched a bit of it. During COP28, the government of Rwanda announced the launch of Rwandan's carbon market framework and a substantial contribution of 40 million USD to support IREME Invest, demonstrating its firm commitment to climate action. Could you share an overview of what the carbon market framework is and its significance?
So carbon credits or the carbon market is an innovative way in which we could mobilize, or countries can mobilize, the financing needed to support projects that are looking to address climate change. So the carbon market has been created to basically be able to, where these countries or companies can buy credits from less polluting or countries that don't pollute at all, such as ourselves, Rwanda, or any developing country, where they buy credits from them and be able to offset basically what they're polluting. Now, it's a complex market. There's issues around double counting, there's issues around greenwashing, whereby you can invest in a project, but which does not necessarily mean that you're reducing carbon emissions. So under the Paris Agreement, under Article 6, countries have been asked to also come up with different frameworks. Now, coming down to the carbon market framework that we have developed as a country, it's a tool which allows us to trade carbon credit. There's two ways in which this is done. It can be through bilateral cooperation, so government to government, but there's also a voluntary market where companies and the private sector can tap into. Now, we launched this at COP28, and really the objective was to send signal to the world and to potential carbon credit buyers, to send the signal that we are ready to trade as a country. We were also able to actually sign a few cooperation agreements. Maybe one that I can highlight is the government of Singapore. So the government of Rwanda signed a cooperation agreement with the government of Singapore. We are also having discussions with the government of Sweden. And basically the idea is that we're going to work on identify a few projects which we can use to basically sell credits to these countries that are looking to offset their carbon emissions.
The Green City Kigali recently won the Africa NDC Investment Awards for the most financeable NDC City of the Year. What are the broader objectives of the Green City Kigali?
The Green City Kigali is basically, it's a pilot project. It's a pilot project which is looking to set the standards, to set new standards for sustainable and climate resilient urban communities. So basically, we have the city of Kigali, but we also have secondary cities that are coming up. How can we ensure that these cities are being built in a sustainable manner? whereby, people and nature can both thrive. So really the whole essence of the green city is to set these new standards. It has, I would say, two main components. One, we've identified Kinyinya as the location, and currently we're concluding the development of a master plan. So we're developing a master plan on the entire hill of Kinyinya, and then within on 600 hectares. Now, within this master plan, or within these 600 hectares, we're going to develop a pilot on 16 hectares, and this will basically entail. This will include. The objective is to build around 1,600 housing units, but also looking at green as well as affordability. So the plan is to start construction at the end of this year. So 2025 will be the year when we should start seeing something on the ground.
And what opportunities do game-changing projects like Green City open up for young entrepreneurs?
We want to make sure that, all the way from the construction materials that are going to be used are going to be climate resilient. So that presents an opportunity for young entrepreneurs to innovate, because if we want to have these cities, like we're saying, we do need to look at the entire value chain. So I think if young entrepreneurs in the space of construction can start thinking on what different innovations are out there in terms of, when we talk about bricks, for example, we know that the Ruliba clay is one that is actually that has less carbon embodied. This pushes us to innovate, to go out there and do research and see what other raw materials can be used to come up with construction materials that can lead us to these green cities.
Collaborative and integrated approaches at local, national, and international levels are essential for effectively building climate resilience. And one of our partners, BK Foundation, is actively investing in building the capacity of green entrepreneurs via the Urumuri Initiative. What are some of the initiatives or projects Green Fund partners or invest in to target entrepreneurs?
Thanks for the good question. Under IREME Invest, we do have two windows. One is looking at project preparation facility, which is basically looking to provide technical assistance as well as that patient capital that I highlighted earlier that can support projects at the initial stage. Now, under this program, we are also going out there and identifying existing incubators. Maybe to give an example, we launched a call for applications on waste and circular economy last year in partnership with GIZ and working with Impact Hub. And under this program, we're basically targeting young entrepreneurs that are in the space of waste and circular economy, but whereby we'll be also providing business development support as well as seed funding to the best performing businesses. And this is just the first call for applications. We're going to do more, but we want to be able to support the private sector across the business life cycle, all the way from ideation to incubation to acceleration, and also be able to create the pipeline that can then be accessed by commercial banks and etc. So at the fund, we're committed to providing this technical assistance, working with existing incubators, to partnering with them, looking at ways in which we can support young entrepreneurs, whether it's on the business development side or providing them with seed funding that can help them kickstart. Again, this is really the catalytic role that I had mentioned of the Green Fund. We want to catalyze existing ecosystem without necessarily reinventing the wheel, but working with the players that are already intervening in the space of entrepreneurship and so on.
And talking about entrepreneurs, how do you see our private sector contributing to developing a portable solution to address the effects of climate change?
What I believe is that our entrepreneurs need to be able to access different financial products, and that's what we've done under IREME Invest. We are providing a wide range of financial products to support businesses across the business life cycle. Because what we've seen in the past is that you can't just have two or one instrument or a line of credit, for example, that is offering loans at 12% and think that's going to solve the issue, because we still have a lot of businesses that are still at the startup phase that need to be accompanied, that actually gets to a stage where they can even go to a bank and access a loan. And that's why we've been able to avail financial products. First of all, before we even talk about accessing finance, we're looking at providing business development support, and then moving on to providing seed funding that can help a business kickstart, to where we'll be providing recoverable grants. Eventually, we're looking also in doing equity. So again, I really see it as a twofold. It's, yes, there is the role that the entrepreneur is, the entrepreneurs and the private sector have a key role to play in terms of addressing climate change, because again, I believe that when it comes to us meeting these goals, we do need innovation and technology have to be fostered. And I don't see who else is going to do that other than entrepreneurs. But on the side of the financiers as well, we also need to be able to deploy financial products that are tailored to the needs of the private sector. And so if those two can, if the private sector or the entrepreneurs are innovating and we are providing the right instruments, then I strongly believe that we can succeed.
My very last question to you, Teddy, which is also a very important one. How do you see the role of Green Fund evolving in the coming years?
So I'm very proud of what the Green Fund has been able to achieve over the last 10 years. But again, the journey continues. We really want to play the catalytic role and really focus on supporting the private sector as well as unlocking private investment. One key area that we want to tap into is when you look at around, there's still a challenge when it comes to equity financing for green projects. So that's one area that we are exploring currently at the fund, to add on to the different financial instruments that we are availing to the private sector. I think it's definitely going to be exciting. So at the Rwanda Green Fund, we are agile and really want to continue availing the financing needed to continue driving our country's green agenda.
Thank you very much, Teddy. That was our last question for today in conversation. I also take this time to really appreciate your time. I also believe so many people will learn a lot of what Rwanda Green Fund is doing and its mission. Thank you very much for today.
At INKOmoko, we're dedicated to empowering entrepreneurs across Africa with the tools, resources, and knowledge they need to flourish in today's competitive business landscape. Now we're bringing that passion to this podcast, taking you on a journey through inspiring stories from around the globe.